Why did I choose to use AI to make a video game? The honest truth is, I didn't choose to use AI. That was my only option. I come from a family of engineers and technical people. They all know how to code, they all know how to create things purely from understanding the technical tools at their disposal. So, for example, I have brothers who can make stuff with Python. They just go, "Oh yeah, I know how to do that. I'll just set it up." Do 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 do. They type. They know all the syntax. Boom, it's there. I got a brother-in-law that's just like, yeah, C++, whatever, JavaScript, whatever. That's just in their DNA, which means it should be in my DNA. But it skipped me. I actually come from a background of music. I'm Robert Monroe. I basically went into music and the arts, and that is where I sort of cut my teeth. And if you give me a piano or you give me music theory to think about, I can do quite well. But code, no, my brain goes crazy. So that leads us to what we're here for. This is going to be the first episode where I discuss why I chose AI, controversies around AI, who I am a little bit more, what I'm doing, some quick ideas, and I'm going to wrap this whole thing up. So first of all, I have always loved video games. I have always loved playing video games. I think they're such a creative tool. I think it's so much fun to explore what is possible with them. But there's this big problem, which is I don't know how to code. And if you don't know how to code, it's kind of a non-starter. And even if you have all these creative ideas, how do you get them out? The language of video games really ultimately is code. But here's the crazy thing. These days, literally in front of our eyes, we're going almost every week from some hurdle that you would have to know to not having to know it anymore because of AI. So my kids were just like, I'm bored. I don't know what to do. So I'm like, you know what? Let's make a video game. That's what we should do. And so I was like, okay, all right, we'll code it together. So how are we going to code it together? Well, I'm just going to pull up Gemini and we're just going to mess around with it. So we made an Uno clone. It took us like 15 minutes to make an Uno clone. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy. And then one of my other daughters was like, hey, you know what would be cool? To make a Super Smash Brothers clone. And I was like, that'd be fun. So I started messing around. I realized pretty quick if I wanted to animate punching, I'd have to actually do some real work. And I was not interested in that. So we made a shooter, a typical, just easy platform shooter. Took maybe an hour max to make a shooter on the iPad. And I was like, wow, this is so powerful. I wonder if I can make games that I've always wanted to exist that don't actually exist. So the first idea I had is a casual card battler. Here's the deal. I love Slay the Spire, as many of you do, I'm sure. I love Balatro. I like other games in that genre too. Monster Train, Peggle, all these different games. But they all have this one big problem. If you're playing them casually on the go, you have to flip the phone horizontally. You got to use two hands, and you got to really engage your brain into what's going on the screen. And, you know, because it's UI designed for stuff that's on PC and consoles, the controls can be really kind of tricky sometimes. The text is really small. So I was like, what if there was a card battler strategy game that you can use your brain and solve those big brain problems, but you only have to use your hand? Wonderful. Okay, how do I do that? So I started messing around, and I was using Gemini. And that's the first thing that I will tell you that is probably actually valuable for those listening to this. If you are trying to do something with AI, don't just use one AI. They're all good at something and worse at something else. So Gemini, for example, is amazing at coding right now from a casual perspective. I know there's better tools. Anthropic with Claude, I think, is technically better in the metrics for coding. And there's all the coding specific tools like Cursor and stuff like that. From someone who's a casual, though, the back and forth in Gemini just feels good. It feels natural, and it's super, super consistent. It rarely hallucinates. It rarely screws up the code. Still does, but it rarely does. ChatGPT screws it up all the time. So I was on Gemini, and I can tell you right now, even in the months that I've been doing this, been doing it for maybe like 3 months, Gemini has gotten way, way better just in that period of time, which is insane. It gets better almost daily. So we've got Gemini, and we're going back and forth, and I make some basic systems. And the first big hurdle I realize is anything UI oriented, anything where dealing with what it visually looks like on the screen, you have infinitely more problems than game logic. And I think this makes regular sense if you just think about it for a second. Like, this is a computer we're talking to get real world results. Anything to do with UI is going to be much more sensitive and taste based. So not only is it going to be harder to convey in objective terms, because the AI can kind of deal with subjectivity, but nowhere near as good as it can deal with something objective, right? So that's a problem. Also, for the AI to see it. Now, first really cool thing that you start to realize when you're messing with this, you can take a screenshot these days and send that to the chat and go, hey, this is not centered. And it actually can see the screenshot and know what you're talking about. Does it do it perfectly? Of course it doesn't. But that gets it down the right road. I went down this for a while, and then I started to realize something. Dealing with like 4 files, and each one is like thousands of lines of code, and it's not organized, is a real problem. And so I actually got to the point where I kind of was at all I could do in that project because it was so disorganized. And I could build it from the ground up, or I could just start from scratch. So I was like, yeah, that was good enough. So then I started another Gemini project. And this one, I went, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to start from the beginning with a structure and an idea and a framework. And I'm going to say, hey, this is what I want the game to look like. This is how I want it to play. Can you give me an idea of what a good structure of files are so I can make sure that not any one file gets so large that I get kind of ground down to this point where the AI can't really help me anymore. So that was kind of try number really 3 at that point. And what I realized is if you do that, you help yourself so much with working with AI, because the biggest issue is Gemini starts to crash and hallucinate when the files get too big. But if I am just asking it for a specific problem, like let's say one of the cards doesn't work right. You know, I want it to give the player strength, and it's not giving them strength based on this condition. I can give it the game state file, I can give it the card file, and I can give it the combat engine file, and then say, hey, help me with this. And it's able to help me out. That way, I can actually make custom chats effectively for every specific game condition that I'm trying to work on. Because another big problem I ran into is when you ask it for too many things, it gets really confused and slows down and bogs down, and ultimately the chat becomes useless. If you have not chatted with ChatGPT or Gemini enough to break a chat, you need to be doing more in AI right now. I'm just letting you know. Let's get into the controversy a little bit, since we've talked a little bit about game and process and all of that. Stealing work from creatives in 2 ways. That's really actually how we should talk about it. We have stealing work in the sense that it is taking from someone else and then remixing it. And then stealing work in the sense that it's taking a job that some creative could have done. So let's start out with first that remixing thing. And this is, again, some people are going to agree with me. Some are going to hate this, but fine. Comment away because, hey, it's going to boost the algorithm. When we are using AI to remix stuff into what we want it to look like, all AI is doing is it has millions and millions of thoughts from other people, and then it's rehashing them, right? How is that different than any other creative process? Hume thought that a unicorn was just someone seeing a horse and putting a horn on it. Hume thought that even our concept of God was basically our idea of a really, really strong human. In many ways, all of our imagination is a remix of all the ideas that have come before. Now, I'm not saying that that is the extent of creativity, but that is definitely the extent of AI creativity, and it's a part of the way that humans themselves make things. Could we be writing this line where we're basically trying to pass off AI things as a substitute or a imitation or potentially as a plagiarized version of something else? Absolutely, and that's problematic. But if you're writing code with AI, if you're even creating art with AI and you're doing it, it's much more like kit bashing, if you know that term, where you basically are taking these stock images and you're putting them together. And I think that's a great framework to think about, because some kit bashing is incredible and amazing and modern and brand new art. And then other kit bashing is very cheap and very easy and problematic and all the things people want to rant about. Let's get into the second controversy real fast, and then I want to wrap up with just some quick fire rounds and just sort of a general thought of where we're going with all these podcast episodes. So, the second controversy, I don't know why I said controversy. That was kind of weird. The second controversy is going to be around stealing work that could be done by another person. Instead of getting into this really, really crazily, I actually just want to address it this simply. I was never going to hire someone to code a video game for me. I was never going to hire an artist to make art for a video game for me. Now, it is possible that now that I'm so far down this journey, that I may actually indeed hire somebody to polish up the code at the end. And I may actually indeed hire an artist to put some final polish into the game that I have. I'm not promising it, but here's the deal. That was not possible until I actually had the inspiration and I was able to go so far in the project by myself with AI. Is that a fulfilling answer to you? It probably isn't, but at least that should give you an insight into the idea that it's not a zero-sum game the way people think it is. If I use AI, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to use somebody else. And every time AI does a task doesn't mean that it's stealing something directly from somebody else. Now, of course, there's all these problematic other ways that AI is being used. That's not for me to decide. I'm not a big Hollywood studio laying off writers. I am just one person making a fun video game on my own. Let me finish with this idea of grunt work versus creative work, because I just think this is fascinating. So when you first start using AI to code, your first thought is, okay, I'm really rusty and have never been good at syntax. So we're doing maybe Python. Python has this weird indentation rule where if you're not indented to the right place, the code screws up and doesn't compile. So you go, okay, all right, I will use AI to straighten out my indentations. And then if I get an error, I'll copy paste that error code into AI. It'll sort out my syntax. You do that and you're like, wonderful, that's awesome. That saved me a lot of work. And that was obviously a grunt task, right? It's just the understanding of how that syntax works. But then you go, well, I actually have some logic, but I'm not quite sure how to code it. Should I use an if-then statement? Should I use a switch case? Should I use some other framework that's in this coding language that I'm not familiar with? So you prompt it and you go, hey, I have this game logic idea. Basically, this is the logical structure for it. How should I code this? Boom, pops out the code. You copy paste it. It works. And you're like, oh. And you're still like, well, it's limited but super helpful, right? Because it took my formal logic and it turned it into coding language. So I didn't actually have to learn how to code that. I can just use the AI to sort it out. And then you go, well, that was grunt work, But it's obviously creative work, me coming up with the game designs, right? It's because I played so many games. I'm such an expert on game design. I don't want to give that up to the AI. But then you think for a second, wait a second, what if I prompt it and go, hey, I'm a real big fan of Slay the Spire, but I want to make this more casual. What are some ideas on how I can take game design ideas like cards, but I want to make it more casual, so I don't want any draw mechanics. I don't want energy manipulation and abuse. I don't want any infinites. So what are other ways that I could make this sophisticated and fun without those things? And then it starts generating a list. Maybe you have mechanics based on buffs and debuffs. Maybe you have other ways, when your hand becomes empty, that has an effect. And then you go, oh, okay, all right. Brainstorming, this is a starting off place. But then you can take those ideas and you can code them. And then you can get the right syntax and the right logic. So now even game design is actually more on the grunt side. So what are you actually doing as a person? You're the director, and you're also really the idea person, the inspiration person, if you will. You're almost like a cheerleader and director and producer. You're the person sitting at the top of the stack, looking around, making the decisions. Because that's another big thing. I think AI starts to really be crappy if you let it make all the decisions. Because again, it's not actually intelligent. That's for another day, but it's not actually intelligent. Where does this get us? It gets us to this point where everything that we thought was grunt work is everything we thought was creative work is actually grunt work. And that doesn't mean that there isn't value in doing that work with your own hands. And I'm not saying to people who are employed doing those things, such as coding, that is grunt work in and of itself. Because here's the thing that I don't think people are realizing. We need people to come up with revolutionary ways to code. So real people need to still be coding. So then AI can look at that and go, oh, well, actually, you can use this new way of coding to do all these other things. We need both. That's the big thing I think people are missing. And just me having fun, experimenting, making a cute little iPhone game, I don't think should scare anybody away from spending time to do all of this actual work or think that cheapens that actual work. So what are some quick ideas, I think, that everyone should try out and something I've tried out? I think one of the big ones that I've been really messing around with is using deep research to get a general framework of an idea and then copy pasting that research report to start a new conversation to actually get an action plan. So let me give you a good example. I want to make an educational math game for my kids because almost all educational math games right now kind of suck because they tend to be very paid ad, like their monetization schemes are awful. And they're either so entertaining but not educational or so educational and super boring. So I love Jumpstart games. It's blast from the past, late 90s, early 2000s. They're amazing. And so I was like, okay, this is what we'll do. We'll do a deep research on Jumpstart. So what is that going to do? The AI is going to look at hundreds of websites, and it's going to pull up best practices, design philosophies of Jumpstart from all these websites. Then I'm going to use that to start as a starting off place for design philosophy for a new game. Then I can take that design philosophy and start enacting those action steps by, you guessed it, taking those action steps and prompting AI to help me code it. I hope this was helpful. I hope that this maybe was just a nice little fireside chat, little chill vibes talk about AI and video games and all that business. I kind of want to get even more casual in the next ones, but I got a little ranty today, so I apologize for that if I came across a little too ranty. But if you like this, like it, please. Comment, disagree with me, do whatever you want. This is just random thoughts from a musician that just happens to really enjoy making stuff with AI. And until next time, you guys have a great time. hoping to follow this up in a week with another episode. So if you comment something interesting, who knows? I might respond to it. All right, peace out.